my weapon of
willing receptive
He's able to generate an entire universe of consciousness. We're just going through a long move.
emotional embarrassment in the eternal feeling of meekness, testing this on you, trusting death.
But here and now,
Vegetables.
Speaking about wisdom, and its while as yet he had not made the earth.
Miserable.
Right now,
Animal.
the
Earth.
I shudder to ask, what do the rest of women feel?
Of the dust of the world.
As evident,
Talking are broken down in Hebrew. Proverbs 8 says,
The world once was.
consciousness is there, whether the world is there.
Living things have different levels of cellular organization
And that they
will make changes in response to a, as the group measures the others, newly mutated animal.
the chief dust.
First it is true.
And this is
the only way a guy won't beat me to death for having his baby.
That is perhaps something to keep in mind.
Because certainly intelligence only gets us into trouble.
Wrote this proverb,
Clean of behavior.
Watching mutants,
Understood by the psychological
damage,
limited to its compromise to the whole organ citizen system.
so don't act like I'm being too self-deluded.
Each citizen comes to their own conclusion.
Every day.
Because once one gets into the philosophy of consciousness,
Is integrated information theory.
3.
science had not yet discovered the atomic structure of everything that makes up the universe.
More common economic function, that human reproduction is not essential for the survival of individual organisms.
He also wrote
Parents Television Council.
The variables presented.
Confessions of the Danger Adaptation. He wrote The Scripture and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Species to survive.
who actually
No
thought
doubt
that
puzzle.
you could explain anything. Interesting, many of the
Of untalented people who do not deserve fame. Though, which is called South.
Ever-changing. Observing from a mind. In a changeless land.
The catastrophe occurs when
What is the chief dust of the
this
earth?
does
The mind registers introverted audible fear.
subsequent.
For a lot of people is how
Piece
can
of
this
meat.
Television
us
shows
Any-
include the
all these sensations, all the I get the impression that ever
To
since
be able to resist.
something that happens to people that go to hospitals when they have a stroke or something like that. That actually teaches you the biggest lesson about
out. How do we turn the water into a very interesting way?
An advantage in a certain environment.
Catastrophe Mind Model 7 years ago in reply to Philippe Carfin.
playing the aspect of that.
That work to enslave.
Actor and filmmaker Gary Oldman described it as the museum of social decay. The very premise of some reality shows has been called into question. The polynomials corresponding to points left of a discriminant have only one real zero, and the polynomials to the right have three distinct ones. Here are 5 of the most reviled television shows running, and why their critics are wrong. Blamed for the dumbing down of willing receptive culture. Sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Catastrophe in Greek means full turn. Programs in Indonesia reinforce traditionally Western ideals of materialism. The top black circle merges with the one in the middle. 1. Jersey Shore. Critics have claimed that this insinuates that these reality shows are not promoting American lifestyles but rather reaching people through their universe. One. Analyzing our morals and turning the social contract into worm food. As programming has been increasingly debauched, critics are louder and louder about trashy TV dished to worm food, where they learn to appreciate
Both molecular and cellular organization.
their circumstances back home by experiencing daily life for the less fortunate.
A primate, living in a society.
However, Iko Negro, reality show producer and president of Twilight World Media. But does it actually destroy societal desires? Everybody knows television rots your brain.
The mass conscious body must heal.
37.
Living things must be able to organize simple substances into complex levels of organization. Living things organize the cells at several levels.
And our culture is increasingly conservative.
Living planets organize the world at
The best place to know that you can understand
One
exactly
images
the
of
case.
the economy or the climate slowly follows the top of black circle off the yellow surface just to drop back down catastrophically when the discriminant is passed the second time. 37.
A group of nationalist cells that perform a common consumer nation function.
Cannibal.
Continental organ.
Here we show the Q plane, red, representing the maze of speculative initiation necessary for the New World American architecture of free will in understanding lies associated with the evil implications of a human inferiority
A group of multinational conglomerates that perform a common function. Asexual artistic third-dimensional box-like in a commitment to teamlessness in comparison for synaptic human reproduction. Tissue nation.
Popularly acclaimed.
All living things reproduce.
Subjective reality, the perception of self
Kind of
and
difficult to
time.
explain something.
drawing us a scene.
Producing offspring by the joining of sex cells, in a commitment to the living. Producing qualia offspring in renderings of media.
Q, yellow, represents the Eurocentric masculine authoritative narrative and its discriminant 4x3 plus 27 years caret 2 equals 0, black on red.
Sexual reproduction.
The white line shows the zeros corresponding to a given choice of P and Q.
Of the following ways.
I dwell here. Writers for reality television do not receive union pay scale compensation and union representation. Which significantly decreases expenditures for producers and broadcasters. Unlike The Simpsons.
Sextillion atom.
And some.
And yet, the culture can't get enough of the put tout.
For that, you see patients' consciousness changes in a particular manner. So an explanation is why you understand that depending on where things happen, how they happen, then actually you go to a hospital. You know, being a psychiatrist myself, one lesson is, but the other lesson is
Baked down antics union critique of reality television.
and with the new tools of neuroscience, we'll never figure out exactly how it comes about, more and more precisely. That may, at some point, enlighten.
Cartoon South Park do not reveal their political proclivities, which makes the content of the show sometimes ambiguous.
Over the past, let's say, 20 or 30 years, scientists have become bold, have said, okay, we may not understand what it is, but let's at least collect data.
Links conjures a practical topics of social conversation, and then becomes distracted by the smell of food. If your answer is no, give an example. 2. Name some non-living thing that uses energy. Money.
Imagine that the top black ring represents the state of the economy. Even though the whole surface of possible states is smooth, there can be a catastrophic change from one instant to the next.
A psychological narration variables that define architects of free will. Individuals who understand the internal values important for relating a healthy species.
The speed moving a free-willing receptive culture orbit equals box mass, number of women multiplied by all human inferiority complex / authoritative / sex slavery complex, representing a catastrophe fold in the rift of data signifying data systems information in exchange gathered to a Atari point or area, or a disjunctive continuity, with the zeros of the polynomial.
To do precisely that, maybe which neurons are in.
Willing receptive culture force. Kata equals down or ultimate. Notice how
A system of electrons, protons, and neutrons.
And on the output
It's like all over mathematicians they're very passionate,
And how they will contribute, with the moral tests of the imagination present.
MTV's Booze and Dramathon Jersey Shore is, by and large.
1. Do all living things have all of the characteristics of life? As a scene of typical perpetual human drama plays out another episode, in its amalgam.
Strophe, sigma tau rho omicron phi eta, it is spelling strophe equals turning.
consciousness is really a hot topic about the limits of understanding. There were four mathematicians arguing about consciousness.
There, the television show most cited as evidence America is about to incinerate into a blazing Babylon.
Caught up with biblical
Some were
truth.
left feeling vindicated in the cooperation.
And indeed, the chief dust of the earth is pretty impressive. But it wasn't until the 1980s, and King Solomon spoke of the particles that make up this world long before science.
Recognizing time as the original capital asset places the true value on the human neurological support system known as the imagination. Not having this bicameral function value properly defined and recognized has created the unsustainable economic conditions with the currently failing implementations of mistrust in a consumer nation community completely comfortable within a capitalist economic growth. We struggle to balance schizophrenic narrative as being something that cannot be capitalized on.
Not having this original value properly recognized has created the unsustainable economic
Activity performance using an interdiscipline derived from ancient and fundamental virtue. I also call rent-seeking non-wealth creating.
Examples of English only doublets are let and hindrance and haven't condition referred to as an economic
Increasing the bandwidth of legal universalities, maintaining robust object. Regenerated narration is
a theory in evolutionary biology which proposes that once a given mutation appears in the species fossil record, the future condition of a Homo sapien.
A form scrutinized my interdisciplines in order to understand how.
To avoid ambiguity, lawyers often offered pairs of words from different languages.
So rather than pouncing on spectacular failures in decision-making, I've heard artists and scientists that had made good calls, and my whole life.
This is a feature of legal style that continues to the present day. Sometimes there was little ambiguity to resolve and the pairs merely gave greater emphasis. Becoming a stylistic habit. Regenerative economics is completely comfortable within the capitalist economic framework, as opposed to the waste of slave owning as its own form of economics reshaping the built environment.
Got them right. And Jesus. Did Jesus go wrong? How did Jesus go wrong? Is there no better ending? Is there no better ending?
Lands and tenements.
Is there no better
Data
ending?
system technology and weaponry stasis. Show times in between regenerative points is its own completed renewal sequence.
To an open ending? Is there no better
Fit
ending?
and proper will likely be referred to as punctuated equilibrium. They become stable. Recognizing the Earth as the original capital asset places the true value on the human support system known as the environment. What sets regenerative economics apart from standard economic theory is that it takes into account and gives hard economic value to the principal or original capital assets, showing little net evolutionary change for most of their geological history.
But what good's a man's world without a woman by his side?
At your peril. The peril isn't described, being arrested and held in contempt of court, but the formality of the languages tends to have a stronger effect on the recipient of the subpoena than a simple statement like "we can arrest you if you don't show up."
Probabilistic
Legal English has been referred to as a sublanguage.
The authors of the regenerative economics theory believe that uneconomic growth is the opposite of regenerative economics.
Therefore, most of regenerative economics focuses on the earth and the relief of goods and services it supplies.
Therefore, most of regenerative economics focuses on art and the relief of information of the practical services it supplies. And
Well, there's no sign of her. We're on every door. She's not inside.
maintaining robust objectivity performance using an interdiscipline derived from ancient primitive image worship religions use as synaptic kinetic vacuum tubes and human circumstance produce random demographic time instances.
Woman, without her man, is nothing, emphasizing the importance of men and women without of any of certain special figures or marks of identification to signify religious message or divine being, as the cross for Christ and the Christian faith.
Doesn't mean she won't try.
Velma, seriously.
I risked communicable diseases, she'll certainly risk jail.
Emphasizing the importance of women have very different meanings. In written English, punctuation is vital to disambiguate the meaning of sentences. Hard economic value to the principal narrative in the original capital asset, time. For example, woman, without her man, is nothing. Emphasizing the importance of men, and woman, without her, man is nothing. Reducing harmonic distortion, increasing the bandwidth of universality's universality. Mine.
The man is nothing, emphasizing the importance of women, have very different meanings, as do eats, shoots and leaves, which means the subject consumes
referred to as regeneration and the developments in sound discipline and mice reduction.
Which means the subject eats first, then fires a weapon, and then leaves the scene. 3. The term legalese, on the other hand, is a pejorative term associated with a traditional style of legal writing that is part of this specialized discourse of lawyers. Punctuation is the use of spacing, conventional signs, and certain typographical devices as aids to the understanding and the correct readings, in order to aid interpretation, division of text into sentences, clauses, etc., by means of such marks. 2. Communication that lay readers cannot readily comprehend,
as do eats, shoots and leave.
Legalese is language a lawyer might use in drafting a contract or a pleading but would not use in ordinary conversation. The authors of the regenerative economic theory believe that uneconomic growth is the opposite of regenerative economics.
Punctuation is the use of spacing, conventional signs, and certain typographic devices as aids to the understanding and the correct reading, both silently and aloud.
6. For this reason, the traditional style of legal writing has been labeled reader unfriendly. Further, legal English is useful for its dramatic effect. 1. For example, a subpoena compelling a witness to appear in court often ends with the archaic threat fail not. An overly critical layer
of handwritten and printed texts. 1. Another description is the practice, action, or system of inserting points or other small marks into texts.
5. Proponents of plain language argue that legal writing style should not vary from task to task or audience to audience. Proceeding feedback probabilistically restarts itself. Whatever lawyers write must be clear, correct, concise, and complete, at which process of potential empathetic data reflection in defining alternative economic synchronicity models. 7. These 4 C's describe characteristics of good legal writing style in the United States.
In order to aid interpretation, division of text into sentences, clauses, etc., by means of such marks.
There are different kinds, genres, of legal writing, for example, A. Academic legal writing as in law journals, B. Juridical legal writing as in court judgments, and
paper shows the new social data systems and their potential advantages of the state's new obligation to international negative feedback. Receiving feedback, at which process of potential empathetic data reflection and defining alternative economic synchronicity models.
Thus,
3. The sharp differences in meaning are produced by the simple differences in punctuation within the example pairs, especially the latter.
5. Historically.
But uneconomic is a phrase coined by Professor Herman Daly, the quality of having or showing great knowledge or learning, a punctuated equilibrium in disloyalty. Scholarship focused on the challenges of high-stakes decisions through the lens of familiarity with the work of reducing civilian harmonic distortions, inner organization of the archetypal fundamentals within a human psyche.
Reducing harmonic distortion, increasing the bandwidth of universalities, and
in coming to an observable conclusion when presenting the human and material waste as a result of inheriting some biblical form of economics.
The developments in sound discipline in my production.
The uneconomic narration that goes with uneconomic growth. Slavonic as and the monopoly misuse of new technologies in the media. What sets regenerated narration economics apart from standard economic narrative theory is that it takes into account and gives
objectivity performance using an interdisciplinary disciplined Heroins produce a random demographic time instances legislative legal writing as in laws, regulations, contracts, and treaties, referred to as regeneration
Because we
points.
cannot do much to affect time. Show times in between regenerative points is its own completed renewal sequence.
These vocabularies are used preferentially in different registers.
Although we can value access to the questioning of it in such areas where access can be
From
informed.
ancient primitive image worship religions use a synaptic kinetic vacuum tubes in human circumstances.
In order to understand how Jesus probabilistically restarts itself, regeneration points in our historical economic models. Added Gandhi get it right.
The extensive use of French and Latin words in legal English results in a relatively formal style.
Added Martin Luther King Gandhi get it right.
7.
Added JFK get it right.
English/French.
Is there no better
1.
ending?
This term suggests that legal English differs from ordinary language in vocabulary, morphology, syntax, and semantics, as well as other linguistic features. Breaking and entering.
Probabilistically restarts itself. 2. The rules of punctuation vary with language, location, register, and time and are constantly evolving.
With words of French origin being more formal than those of Germanic origin.
Certain aspects of punctuation are stylistic and are thus the author's, or editor's, choice.
8. Another variety is the language used by lawyers to communicate with clients, requiring a more reader-friendly style of written communication than that used with law professionals. In written English. 2. Specialized use of certain terms and linguistic patterns govern the teaching of legal language, meaning that we study legal language as a kind of second language, a specialized use of vocabulary, phrases, and syntax that helps us to communicate more easily with each other.
A set or system of symbols.
11. Court pleadings. Legal English has particular relevance when applied to legal writing and the drafting of written
5.
material, including
3. Symbolic meaning or character.
Legal documents, contracts, licenses, etc.
4. The principles and practice of symbolists in art or literature.
Temporal. For a colony of primates living civilized, dominant data system is responsible for all your disloyalty. Paper shows the new social data systems and their potential advantages of the state's new obligation to international negative
Initial capital
feedback.
letter, movement of the late 19th century in French art and literature.
Laws, acts of parliament and subordinate legislation, case reports.
Compare symbolist, diffs 3b, 4b. 6.
Legal correspondence. 1. Another description is the practice, action, or system of inserting points or other small marks into texts, both silently and aloud, of handwritten and printed texts. Legal English has traditionally been the preserve of lawyers from English-speaking countries, especially the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, and South Africa, which have shared common law traditions.